Imagine this: a cold morning in 17th century Amsterdam. Crowds line up by the harbor not to watch a king's decree, but to buy pieces of paper, shares. They're not carrying swords or banners, only belief. The belief that their money could change the world. That company was the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. No kings, no palaces, just vision, organization, and capital. While other empires ruled through war, the Dutch built theirs through stocks, investment, and dividends. It was the first moment in history when humanity realized power doesn't only come from bloodlines, it comes from those who know how to create value. I once met a young founder in San Francisco who told me, I don't want to be a king. I just want to build something people can believe in. And I smiled, and because that's exactly what VOC did 400 years ago. They proved that you don't need a throne to build an empire. You just need vision, trust, and people willing to build it with you. Picture this: Spanish and Portuguese ships flooding the oceans, cannons loaded, flags flying. Meanwhile, in the north, the Dutch had no massive army, no empire, just a new kind of weapon: private capital. They gathered money from merchants, nobles, and ordinary citizens. Everyone contributed something small, and together those fragments of belief formed a force stronger than any navy. The Dutch understood something revolutionary. Money can travel faster than gunpowder, and trust can reach farther than any cannon. A venture capitalist once told me in New York, I don't invest in companies. I invest in how people see the world. That's exactly what the Dutch did. They didn't just fund trade. They invested in a vision of the future. It was the first time in history that capital became a weapon, one that didn't destroy but built. And through that, the Dutch taught the world that power isn't just about conquest. It's about turning belief into movement, and movement into prosperity. In 1602, people gathered in Amsterdam Square, trading small slips of paper, not love letters, not royal edicts, but the world's first stock certificates. For the first time ever, a baker, a carpenter, or a tailor could own a piece of a global empire. They didn't need titles or privilege, only belief that their small investment could shape the future. The VOC opened its doors to everyone, creating the world's first public offering. The ancestor of every IPO, crowdfunding campaign, and startup pitch deck today. A young founder once asked me, how do I make people believe in an idea that doesn't exist yet? I told him, you're not selling a product. You're selling the right for that product to exist. That's exactly what the Dutch did. They weren't selling spice or silk. They were selling a future. And every investor who bought in wasn't just chasing profit. They were buying a piece of destiny. Now let me tell you about the House of Orange-Nassau, a dynasty that didn't rule through crowns but through capital. While other monarchies spent fortunes on wars, the Orange family invested, not in armies, but in the VOC. And in doing so, they became the world's first political investors. People who shaped nations through ownership, not conquest. A business leader in Boston once told me, power doesn't have to be granted. It can be built if you invest in the right things. That's exactly what the Orange family understood. They didn't fight for the throne. They bought influence. And in time, their dividends became diplomacy. Their shares became power. They proved that in a new world, authority didn't have to be inherited. It could be invested. And from that point forward, money and politics would never again be strangers. Imagine investing in a ship that might never return. Would you risk your house, your family, your entire life for one voyage? Before the VOC, the answer was no. But then came a revolutionary idea: limited liability. For the first time, investors could risk money without risking everything. If the ship sank, they lost their stake, but their home, family, and savings remained safe. That simple rule freed humanity from the fear of failure. It let people take risks, innovate, and create. And that mindset would later define Silicon Valley. A mentor once told me, without limited liability, there would be no Apple, no Google, no Tesla, because no one would dare risk it all. From Amsterdam to California, the same spirit lives on. Innovation thrives where fear of loss is limited. And maybe that's the greatest gift the VOC gave us, a world where ambition could exist without self-destruction. Early 1600s. Picture Amsterdam's bustling canals and crowded coffee houses. Merchants shouting prices, papers changing hands. This was the world's first stock exchange and the heartbeat of global finance. Here, the VOC transformed commerce into a system, a network of trust, speculation, and information. From Amsterdam, the idea spread to London, and then across the Atlantic to New York, where it would eventually become Wall Street. A broker once told me, "Money never sleeps on Wall Street." And I smiled, and because really it hasn't slept since Amsterdam. Every ticker symbol, every ringing bell, every market crash, they all trace their roots back to the day merchants realized that value could be traded faster than ships could sail. The VOC didn't just build a company, they built a language of money that the world still speaks today. Now imagine this, a company with its own army, navy, taxation, and government. Not a country, but a corporation. That was the VOC. At its peak, it controlled the world's major trade routes, seized Jakarta, then Batavia, and ruled over vast territories in Asia. It could sign treaties, collect taxes, even wage war, all in the name of profit. It was the first time in history when shareholders didn't just earn dividends, they owned an empire. A colleague once told me, when capital grows large enough, it demands power. And when power grows unchecked, it starts to look like a nation. The VOC proved it. They became the first shareholder state, and where decisions were made in boardrooms, not royal courts. And that was the beginning of a new kind of empire, one that governed the world not with armies, but with accounting ledgers. No empire lasts forever. After 2 centuries of dominance, the VOC began to rot from within. Ambition turned into arrogance. Costs soared, corruption spread, and leadership lost sight of the basics: transparency, accountability, discipline. A startup founder once told me, "I want my company to grow as fast as Amazon." I asked, "Do you manage it as carefully as Amazon?" He didn't answer. That silence says it all. Growth without control leads to collapse. The VOC fell for the same reason many startups do today. They scaled faster than they could understand themselves. It's a timeless lesson. Ambition is fuel, but without boundaries, it burns the ship instead of moving it forward. Unlike ancient empires that expanded through conquest, the VOC expanded through replication. They built a system, contracts, shares, governance, that could be copied anywhere. That's scaling by design, not by territory. It's the same mindset behind modern giants like Uber, Airbnb, and Tesla. Uber doesn't own cars, Airbnb doesn't own hotels. Tesla doesn't just sell cars, it sells a scalable system. A startup founder once told me, "I don't want to open more branches. I want to replicate how my company works." And I said, "If your model runs without you, you've built more than a business. You've built a system." That's what the VOC did. They didn't export soldiers, they exported structure. They didn't conquer, they persuaded through profit. True scalability isn't about how far you can go, it's about how easily your vision can multiply. Picture this again. People crowding the Amsterdam docks, not for spectacle, but to invest in an idea. They didn't know if the ships would return, yet they invested, not just money, but faith. The VOC didn't just raise funds, they built collective trust. They proved that the most valuable capital isn't financial, it's social trust. A young founder once asked me, "How can I get investors to believe in me when I'm just starting out?" I told him, "Don't sell your product. Show them the system behind it. Show them that their money will build something bigger than both of you." The VOC did exactly that. They didn't say, "Give us money." They said, "Join us and help us expand the world." And that's the difference between fundraising to survive and fundraising to inspire. Investors don't follow spreadsheets, they follow conviction. And just like 400 years ago, capital always flows to where trust is strongest. Today, the Netherlands is no longer a maritime empire. But make no mistake, it's still a financial superpower. Over $9.5 trillion dollars in global investments flow in and out of this tiny nation of just 18 million people. That's not coincidence. That's the long shadow of the VOC. Companies like Royal Dutch Shell and ING Group are its modern descendants. Shell carries the spirit of capital as power, merging royal prestige with shareholder influence. ING, one of Europe's largest banks, still runs on the same VOC principle. Diversify risk, concentrate trust. A financial analyst in London once told me, if you want to understand Wall Street, study Amsterdam first. And he's right. Every exchange, every fund, every investment platform today echoes the architecture the VOC designed. The Netherlands may no longer rule the seas, but it quietly rules the flow of money that moves them. But no light exists without its shadow. Behind VOC's prosperity lay a grim truth. Slavery, exploitation, and bloodshed. In Banda, Ambon, and Batavia, now Indonesia, thousands of locals were massacred, enslaved, or forced into labor to produce spices for European markets. While investors in Amsterdam toasted their profits, lives were destroyed across the ocean. That's the dark side of progress, when profit outruns morality. A fund manager once told me, we talk endlessly about shareholder value, but rarely about human value. That hit me hard. The VOC gave the world capitalism, but also a warning. Without ethics, finance becomes another form of conquest. When people turn into numbers on a balance sheet, prosperity becomes hypocrisy. And maybe the greatest lesson from VOC isn't how they made money, but what they lost while doing it. Let me leave you with this thought. Capital is the new crown. 400 years ago, the Dutch East India Company saw what few others did. Power never disappears, it just changes wallets. Once, kings ruled through swords and thrones. Now, investors rule through capital and code. The House of Orange understood it then, and modern venture capitalists understand it now. The true rulers of our age don't wear crowns, they sign checks. A friend of mine in venture capital once said, we're not just funding companies, we're funding the future. And that's exactly what VOC started centuries ago. Today, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, their legacy lives on. We live in a world where the most powerful empires aren't nations, they're networks. And the question is no longer who rules, but who invests in shaping the world we all live in.